Hi Reddit. I'm not the type of person to share my life publicly, but I feel like I've been pushed into a corner. My name's Ethan, and my world has been flipped upside down over the past few weeks. It all started with something I thought was harmless, a fleeting annoyance at best. But now, I realize it was the beginning of a storm I didn't see coming. I'm married to Nicole, and while our marriage has had its ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. We've been together for 7 years and have built a comfortable life. But the cracks started to show when her cousin Lydia and her husband Eric moved to our city a few months ago. Nicole was thrilled about their arrival. She and Lydia had always been close, practically like sisters. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, family is family, right? But from the moment I met Eric, something felt off. Eric was charming, too charming. The kind of guy who always had a joke, always knew how to command attention. He was the life of every gathering, and people seemed to love him. But there was something about the way he acted around me that didn't sit right. At first, it was subtle. Lingering glances, standing just a little too close during conversations, and finding excuses to be near me. I tried to brush it off as paranoia. Maybe I was overthinking things. But then it started to escalate. During one family barbecue at Lydia and Eric's new house, I caught him staring at me from across the yard. Not a casual glance, but an intense, almost predatory look. It was enough to make my skin crawl. "Hey, Ethan, you okay?" Nicole asked, nudging me. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. But inside, I felt anything but fine. Later that evening, as I was helping Lydia clean up, Eric cornered me in the kitchen. "You know, you're really easy to talk to," he said, his voice low. Thanks," I said, trying to sidestep him. But he didn't move. "I mean it," he continued, leaning in slightly. "It's rare to meet someone as genuine as you." I laughed nervously, brushing past him to grab a trash bag. "Appreciate it, Eric. I should get back to Nicole." For the rest of the night, I avoided him as much as possible. But his words and the way he looked at me lingered in my mind. The next few weeks were no better. Eric's behavior grew bolder. He'd find reasons to text me, asking about some random thing he supposedly needed my advice on. Or he'd accidentally bump into me while we were all together. It was subtle enough, maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Things came to a head at another family gathering. This time, it was at our house, and Eric found an excuse to linger in the hallway while I was grabbing drinks from the fridge. "You're avoiding me," he said, blocking my path. "I'm busy," I replied, trying to move past him. "You don't have to be scared, you know," he said, his tone almost mocking. I froze, anger bubbling up inside me. "Excuse me?" He smirked, leaning in closer. "I know you feel it too." That was it. I pushed past him and stormed into the living room, my hands shaking. Nicole noticed immediately. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," I snapped. "Just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was furious. And I was done pretending that Eric's behavior was normal. That night, after everyone had left, I couldn't hold it in any longer. The weight of Eric's actions and Nicole's dismissiveness was crushing me. "Nicole," I began hesitantly as she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone. "What's up?" she asked, not even glancing my way. "We need to talk about Eric," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She put her phone down, finally giving me her full attention. "Ethan, we've already been over this. He's just friendly." "No, Nicole. He's not just friendly. He's been crossing the line for weeks now, and tonight was the last straw." Her brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The stares, the texts, the way he cornered me in the hallway. Her expression shifted from confusion to irritation. "Ethan, do you hear how ridiculous you sound? Eric? Flirting with you? He's married to Lydia. Why would he?" "Exactly." I interrupted. "Why would he?" "But he is, Nicole. And I need you to take this seriously." Instead of listening, she shook her head and sighed. "You're being paranoid. Maybe you're misinterpreting things." "Misinterpreting?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How do you misinterpret someone saying, 'I know you feel it too'?" Nicole's face hardened. "Maybe he was joking. You know how Eric is. Always trying to get a reaction." Her words hit me like a slap. She didn't believe me. No matter how many details I gave, she brushed them aside as misunderstandings or overreactions. I can't believe this, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. Ethan, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, she said, standing up. If you're so uncomfortable, maybe you should talk to him directly. Her suggestion lingered in my mind for days. The thought of confronting Eric made my stomach churn, but what choice did I have? Nicole wouldn't take me seriously, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A few days later, Lydia invited us over for dinner. I considered refusing, but I knew this was my chance to address the issue head-on. When we arrived at Lydia and Eric's house, everything felt off. Eric greeted me with his usual charm, but there was a smugness in his tone that made my skin crawl. "Ethan, great to see you," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. I forced a polite smile and avoided his gaze. "Yeah, you too." Throughout dinner, I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. After the meal, while everyone else was chatting in the living room, I asked Eric to step outside with me. "What's this about?" he asked, feigning innocence as we stood on the back porch. "You know exactly what this is about," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Your behavior, the texts, the way you act around me, it needs to stop." He tilted his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "You've been crossing the line for weeks, and I'm done pretending it's nothing." For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a low, mocking sound that made my blood boil. "You think you can tell me what to do?" he said, stepping closer. "You're nothing, Ethan. Just some insecure little enough." I interrupted, my voice echoing in the night. The door behind us swung open, and Nicole and Lydia stepped out, both looking alarmed. "What's going on out here?" Nicole demanded. "Ethan's having a little meltdown," Eric said casually, shrugging. I turned to Nicole, desperate for her support. "He's been harassing me, Nicole. I've told you this before." Nicole's face twisted in disbelief. "Ethan, are you serious? Eric wouldn't do that." Lydia crossed her arms, glaring at me. "This is ridiculous. Eric's done nothing wrong. You're just trying to stir up drama." "I'm not lying," I insisted, my voice cracking. Nicole shook her head, disappointment etched across her face. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Ethan." My heart sank as I realized the truth. They weren't going to believe me. No matter what I said, they had already made up their minds. The fallout from that night was swift and brutal. Nicole and I barely spoke, and the tension in our home was unbearable. Worse, word of my accusations spread through the family like wildfire. Before I knew it, I was being painted as the troublemaker, the one causing unnecessary drama. One by one, Nicole's relatives began blocking me on social media. Texts and calls went unanswered, and family gatherings became a minefield. I was being ostracized for telling the truth, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The silence in my home was deafening. Nicole barely looked at me, and when she did, it was with a mix of disappointment and anger. The weight of being dismissed by everyone I cared about was suffocating, but I wasn't about to let it break me. I knew what I saw. I knew what Eric had done, and I was determined to prove it. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started by going through the few messages Eric had sent me. Most of them seemed innocent on the surface, questions about weekend plans or family gatherings, but a closer look revealed a pattern. There were subtle comments, odd phrasing, things that felt off when viewed in hindsight. But it wasn't enough. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. The following weekend, Nicole went to visit her parents, leaving me alone at the house. It was the perfect opportunity to dig deeper. I reached out to a tech-savvy friend, someone I trusted completely, and asked for help retrieving deleted messages and metadata from my phone. What we found made my stomach churn. Buried in the metadata of a seemingly deleted thread were fragments of texts from Eric. One stood out. "You're different from the rest of them." I could really see us being something. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't just harassment. This was calculated. He'd been testing the waters, trying to gauge how far he could push me. I forwarded the evidence to myself and sat back, my mind racing. This was it. This was the proof I needed to confront him once and for all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction with Eric, every dismissive comment from Nicole and Lydia. They had chosen to believe his lies over my truth, but now I had something they couldn't ignore. The next morning, I called Nicole. "Hey," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "What do you want, Ethan?" she replied coldly. "We need to talk," I said. "And I need you to be open to listening this time." Nicole reluctantly agreed to meet me at a local cafe. She arrived late, her arms crossed and her expression guarded. "This better not be another one of your accusations," she said as she sat down. I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. "Just look at this," I said, sliding it across the table. She glanced at the screen, her brow furrowing as she read the fragments of texts. Her face paled slightly, but she quickly masked it with a look of disbelief. "Where did you even get this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "It doesn't matter where," I said. "What matters is that it's real, Nicole. He's been harassing me, and now you can see it for yourself." She shook her head, pushing the phone back toward me. "This doesn't prove anything. For all I know, you could have faked this to make him look bad." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Even with the evidence staring her in the face, she refused to believe me. "Nicole, why are you so determined to defend him?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why can't you see what's right in front of you?" She looked away, her jaw clenched. "Because Eric wouldn't do this. He's family. Lydia's husband. He has no reason to." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment, I thought I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. But before I could press further, she stood up. "I need to go," she said, grabbing her bag. "I can't deal with this right now." As she walked away, I felt a mix of anger and despair. No matter how much evidence I gathered, it seemed like I was shouting into the void. But I wasn't about to give up. When I got home, I decided to take things a step further. If Nicole wouldn't believe me, maybe someone else would. I reached out to Lydia, asking to meet her one-on-one. She was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed. We met at a quiet park, far from prying eyes. "What's this about, Ethan?" she asked, her tone wary. "I need to talk to you about Eric," I said, pulling out my phone again. "There's something you need to see." Her reaction would change everything. I handed Lydia my phone, heart pounding as I watched her scroll through the messages. Her face remained unreadable, her lips pressed into a tight line. After what felt like an eternity, she finally looked up, her expression a mix of disbelief and something else, fear. "This can't be real," she whispered, shaking her head. "Eric, he wouldn't." "Lydia, I know it's hard to believe," I said gently, "but I need you to see this for what it is. He's been doing this for weeks, and no one will listen to me." Her hands trembled as she handed the phone back. "I need to talk to him," she said, her voice barely audible. "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. If you confront him now, he'll just twist the story like he always does. We need more." Lydia looked at me, clearly torn. "What do you mean, more?" "We need proof that can't be dismissed," I explained. "Something undeniable. If we're going to expose him, we have to do it the right way." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" It felt like a small victory, but I knew the hardest part was yet to come. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with possibilities, plans, and fears. Lydia's agreement to help was a step forward, but it also meant she was now caught in the crossfire. I didn't want to drag her into this mess, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. The next day, Lydia called me. "I found something," she said, her voice shaky. "What is it?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "Just come over," she said before hanging up. When I arrived at Lydia's house, she was waiting for me on the porch, her face pale. She led me inside and handed me a small black notebook. "I found this in Eric's office," she said quietly. It's bad, Ethan." I opened the notebook and felt my stomach drop. It was filled with notes, detailed observations about me, comments about my interactions with Nicole, and even plans to isolate me further from the family. One entry read, "Nicole doesn't trust him anymore. Perfect. Keep pushing the narrative. Make him look unstable. Another said, next step, force a confrontation. If he snaps, it'll only confirm what I've been saying. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This wasn't just harassment. This was calculated manipulation. We have to show this to Nicole, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and relief. She won't believe it, Lydia said bitterly. She's too loyal to him. She'll believe it when we show her everything, I insisted. That evening, we arranged for Nicole to come over. When she arrived, she was visibly irritated. What now, Ethan? She snapped. Just hear us out, I said, gesturing for her to sit down. Lydia and I laid out everything, the messages, the notebook, and even her own observations about Eric's behavior. At first, Nicole looked skeptical, but as we went on, her expression began to change. By the time we finished, she was pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. This can't be real, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It is, Lydia said softly. I didn't want to believe it either, but it's all there. Nicole's reaction was a mix of shock, anger, and guilt. I defended him, she said, tears streaming down her face. I called you a liar, Ethan. I didn't believe you. It's not too late to make this right, I said gently. Nicole nodded, her resolve hardening. He's not getting away with this. The next day, Nicole confronted Eric in front of the entire family. Armed with the evidence we'd gathered, she laid everything out for everyone to see. Eric tried to deny it at first, but the weight of the proof was too much. By the end of the confrontation, Eric was left speechless, his carefully crafted facade shattered. The fallout was immediate. The family, once so quick to side with him, turned against him. Nicole apologized to me over and over, her regret clear in every word. As for Eric, he packed his bags and left town, his reputation in ruins. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't just about exposing Eric. It was about reclaiming my voice, my truth, and my dignity. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. And that was enough. Eric's departure didn't mean everything immediately went back to normal. The family was still reeling from the revelations, and the damage he caused left scars that would take time to heal. Nicole and I found ourselves navigating uncharted waters, trying to piece together a relationship that had been frayed by doubt and betrayal. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Nicole broke the silence. Ethan, I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for not believing you sooner, she said, her voice trembling. It's not about forgiveness, I replied, choosing my words carefully. It's about moving forward. We both made mistakes, but what matters is how we rebuild from here. Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw genuine vulnerability in her. It was a start, but not everyone was as willing to reconcile. Lydia, who had been instrumental in exposing Eric, was grappling with her own emotions. Her trust in her husband had been completely shattered, and she struggled to comprehend how she had missed the signs. I feel like a fool, she confided to me during one of our conversations. How could I have been so blind? You're not a fool, I assured her. Eric was manipulative. He fooled all of us to some extent. But the important thing is, you stood up and did the right thing. Lydia nodded, though her pain was still evident. I just need time, she said softly. As for the rest of the family, the fallout was messy. Many of them, embarrassed by how they had treated me, reached out with apologies. Some were genuine, while others felt more like attempts to save face. I accepted their apologies with grace, but I knew it would take time to fully trust them again. Meanwhile, Nicole and I decided to start therapy together. It wasn't an easy decision, but we both recognized the need to address the underlying issues in our marriage. The sessions were emotionally exhausting, but they also opened the door to honest conversations we had avoided for years. One session, in particular, stood out. The therapist asked Nicole, "Why do you think you were so quick to dismiss Ethan's concerns about Eric?" Nicole hesitated, then sighed deeply. I was afraid of what it would mean if he was right. Admitting that Eric was capable of something like this meant admitting I'd been wrong about him, and about a lot of other things too. Her words hit me hard, but they also brought a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about Eric's actions. It was about the cracks in our relationship that had allowed him to manipulate us in the first place. Slowly but surely, we began to rebuild. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the weight of everything threatened to pull us under. But with each step forward, I felt a little stronger, a little more confident in our ability to overcome this. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Lydia, she turned to me and said, "You know, Ethan, I think Eric underestimated you. He thought he could break you, but here you are, still standing." Her words stayed with me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of pride in myself. I had faced one of the most challenging chapters of my life and come out the other side, not unscathed, but stronger. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that this experience, as painful as it was, taught me some invaluable lessons. It taught me the importance of trusting my instincts, standing up for myself, and never letting anyone silence my truth. Most importantly, it taught me the power of resilience, the ability to face adversity and come out the other side, not just surviving but thriving. And for that, I am grateful. The next chapter of my life is unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see where it leads. Let me know if you'd like to expand or adjust anything further. The dust was beginning to settle. After weeks of chaos, accusations, and emotional upheaval, life finally started to feel somewhat normal again. But normal had a different meaning now. Nicole and I were rebuilding, piece by fragile piece. Lydia was navigating her own journey of healing, and the family's dynamic had changed forever. One evening, Nicole and I sat together on the back porch, a rare moment of peace between us. She looked over at me, her expression softer than it had been in months. "Ethan," she began, her voice hesitant, "I know I've apologized before, but I need to say it again. For not believing you, for doubting you, for everything." I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. "Nicole, it hurt," I admitted. "It hurt more than I can put into words, but I can see you're trying. And that's what matters now." She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't want to lose you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "You're not going to," I replied. "But we have to work on this on us. It's not going to happen overnight." She nodded, a small but hopeful smile breaking through her tears. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was real, and that was enough for now. Meanwhile, Lydia was making strides in her own recovery. She had filed for divorce from Eric, cutting him out of her life entirely. It was a painful process, but one she approached with quiet determination. "I can't believe I stayed with him for so long," she said during one of our conversations. "But I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." "You're stronger than you realize," I told her. She smiled, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Maybe, but I couldn't have done it without you." As for the rest of the family, the fallout was still ongoing. Some members distanced themselves, unwilling to confront their role in the drama. Others tried to mend fences, offering apologies that ranged from heartfelt to half-hearted. I accepted them with grace, but I knew better than to let everyone back in so easily. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. But not everything was about looking back. Slowly, I started to focus on the future. I took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even began volunteering at a local community center. Each small step felt like a piece of myself coming back together. One day, while organizing some old photos, I came across one from the early days of my marriage. It was a picture of Nicole and me, laughing at something neither of us could remember now. For the first time in a long time, I felt a pang of something other than pain when I looked at it. I realized that while the past few months had been some of the hardest of my life, they had also taught me invaluable lessons. I learned to stand up for myself, even when it felt like the world was against me. I learned the importance of resilience, of holding on to your truth even when others doubt you. And most importantly, I learned that healing is a journey, not a destination. As I closed the photo album, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. My story wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by how I had chosen to rise above it. And that, I realized, was the beginning of a new chapter.